Getting everyone set for the spring game, April 7th on the Plains. Auburn football with the Tigers going to spring practice on February 27th and culminating this Saturday. We've got Benjamin Wolk from SEC Country on the line to break down the Tigers and really give us an overall assessment before we watch the boys on the field for the first time in quite a while since that Peach Bowl loss to Central Florida. So I see that there are a number of impact players, number ones, who are sitting out spring practice. Any concern there?
I mean, injuries, unfortunately for Auburn, have sort of dominated the storylines of this spring. I mean, Will Hastings going down with an ACL injury, Eli Stove going down with an ACL injury. Those are two big hits at the wide receiver position for Auburn. You had Daquan Newkirk, who was an incoming junior college prospect, a defensive lineman that was going to add a lot of depth. If there's one position that Auburn sits fairly comfortably at in the 2018 season, it's definitely along the defensive line, but still, you know, those are some injuries that they wanted to avoid. I mean, I think the main concern for Auburn at this point are those two wide receiver injuries to Eli Stove and to Will Hastings. Auburn sort of goes with a specialty approach at wide receiver. They have a lot of guys that specialize in certain things, and Eli Stove was their, you know, he was their jet sweep specialist, and Will Hastings was a slot guy, and he's not someone, his route running, you're not going to find many people on this Auburn roster that are able to replicate that. What'll be interesting, you know, with them likely being out for the 2018 season, there's four incoming freshmen. One's already enrolled, Bo Jackson's nephew, Shedrick Jackson, but three incoming guys, Matthew Hill, Anthony Schwartz, and Seth Williams. I think one of them is going to need to step up as a true freshman if they're really going to fill the void that's left behind by Eli Stove and Will Hastings.
Yeah, Stove accounted for 315 yards rushing, also 29 receptions. Hastings, 26 catches and 2 touchdowns this past season for the Auburn Tigers. So if we look at the defense, you mentioned it, defensive line has been the wrecking crew. That's been the mainstay of this defense for the past few years. Set us up defensively. Of course, the secondary has been loaded with veterans in the past, but some of those guys moving on. What's the defensive assessment this year?
I think that they're expecting a pretty solid carryover from last year. I mean, the defense has just seen such a huge uptick since Kevin Steele took over as defensive coordinator. That defensive front is really what's going to carry Auburn this year, though. I mean, along the defensive line, they've got multiple guys that could really leave after the 2018 season, leave early for the NFL draft. Derek Brown, Marlon Davidson, Nick Coe. I mean, all of those guys have NFL futures. They've got a couple of seniors, staples to the defensive line. On the interior, Andrew Williams and Dontavius Russell. I mean, I think that those are, while they don't necessarily have the star power or the pop of a guy like Derek Brown, Marlon Davidson, or Nick Coe, they've been around for a long time, and they've sort of taken on that senior leadership role on this defensive line. And then you've got some of these young guns who have not had a ton of opportunity just because of how deep this defensive line has been the last couple of years. But T.D. Moultrie and Big Cat Bryant are a couple of guys who are going to be the buck edge rusher in this Auburn defense. And, you know, Auburn's had a lot of success the last couple of years with Carl Lawson and then Jeff Holland. T.D. Moultrie is likely going to step right in behind and fill that role pretty well. So that defensive front, and then you look at the linebackers. I mean, they've got three senior linebackers with Deshaun Davis, Montavious Atkinson, and Darrell Williams. The defensive front, I mean, that front seven is going to be what carries Auburn throughout this season, at least on the defensive side of the ball, because like you mentioned, they lost some pieces in the secondary at safety with Stephen Roberts and Trey Matthews. They lost Carlton Davis at cornerback. So there's some defensive back vacancies. But, you know, generally if that defensive front is as strong as it is for Auburn, at least through the first couple weeks of the season, you can work through some of those defensive back issues you might have.
Yeah, Carlton Davis, of course, for the past few years, considered not just one of the best in the SEC, but one of the best in the nation. Deshaun Davis, as you mentioned, stalwart at linebacker, led the team with 82 tackles, 7 for loss, and 4 sacks. All right, what's going to make you feel better, Benjamin, about the Auburn Tigers going into 2018 and really August camp based on what you see this Saturday? What are you looking for?
I think it's got to be the running back position. I mean, obviously, running back's never a huge concern at Auburn. They've had a lot of issues in the past. I mean, you just look at 2 off seasons ago. Rock Thomas transferred. Javon Robinson was dismissed. Peyton Barber left maybe a little earlier from the NFL than he should have. And there were these huge concerns about what Auburn was going to do. They ended up finding Cameron Petway, who had really been on the roster as an H-back for most of his time at Auburn in the past. He has a 1,000-yard season. The next season, Cameron Petway is injured really from January on, and Kerryon Johnson finally steps up. So Auburn tends to work through these running back issues pretty well, but there's just a lot of uncertainty in this running back depth chart, and I think that on Saturday it's going to be a very run-heavy offense, especially if Jarrett Stidham's not playing. I mean, Malik Willis and Joey Gatewood at quarterback, lower, down the depth chart, they're more run-first type of guys as is. So I expect this to be a run-heavy scrimmage, and they're trying to figure out who their number one guy is at running back and really maybe who their number two guy is at running back as well. And I think what they see on Saturday, it'll be their third scrimmage of the spring. I think that they'll really have a good idea of what they want to do starting at running back going into the fall.